What's up, party people? It's your boy Optimus Code. Welcome to the channel. Hey, so we're gonna get right back into it. This is part 2 of my developer interview with a AAA multi-plat developer. I am pretty sure that you are really gonna enjoy this video unless you are a fake tech expert. Everyone else will love it. Fake tech experts will not. Let's get it.
Couldn't be, put out into the public domain.
So, like, if you're working for a AAA studio,
yeah,
you have an NDA, period.
I wouldn't say it's an NDA, but yeah, you have a legal responsibility because you signed a contract with that company. Just like they have responsibilities to pay you on time, just like they have responsibilities to provide you with a work environment, a safe working environment, all this kind of thing. You have obligations to them. You are meant to do your job, and part of your job and part of your terms and conditions of your job will be, protecting the business, protecting the business and the project. Yeah. So, I mean, say Bunny Hop 5, we haven't put that out to the press yet. There's no press release. They don't know we're working on Bunny Hop 5. I can't go around talking about Bunny Hop 5.
Sure. Okay.
The moment Bunny Hop 5 is in the public domain, as it were, once the PR team has put out Bunny Hop 5 is being worked on, this is what Bunny Hop 5 looks like, here's the launch trailer, I can then say, I'm working on Bunny Hop 5. I might even be able to say what I'm working on in Bunny Hop 5, depending, but what I can't say is, even then, I can't, you can only talk about things which are in the public domain. So the things that are public, I mean, it's the same with NDAs. I mean, I kind of feel like with all these die shots of the PS5's chip, the SoC, once people start actually accurately identifying what those components are and what they do.
So are you implying that what's out now is not accurate representation?
I couldn't say one way or the other. But what I'm saying is once people actually start, accurately identifying what is there, what isn't there. And the same with the Xbox Series X chip, actually, and the Series S chip. Once people start accurately identifying things, you might start you might start having people being more willing to talk about it, because once it's in a public domain, an NDA isn't enforceable. An NDA is there to protect information which isn't already available, right? But if the information is already available, I can talk about it. An NDA is completely legally useless. Once the cat is out of the bag, an NDA is a completely useless and meaningless legal device and all. So, I mean, they can't really take you to court for talking about Bunny Hop 5 if Bunny Hop 5 is being leaked on IGN and there's a video of Bunny Hop 5. All right, so let me ask you this, because that's a really interesting point. Okay, so once it hits public domain, you then have the ability to discuss whatever's in the public domain, but that then implies that these corporations don't actually tell you everything about their technology, be it software or hardware. So there are some things that Microsoft hasn't publicly disclosed about the Series X and S, and there are some things that Sony hasn't disclosed about the PlayStation 5. Oh, there's lots they haven't disclosed, yeah.
So all of these people...
For both of them, just to clarify that, for both of them, there is quite a bit that hasn't been disclosed.
So all these people making all of these grandiose conclusions based on this piece of information, and they say, based on this thing for sure has to be this way or that way. What do you say to that kind of stuff?
Talking in absolutes is just silly, especially in software. And I'm hearing people talk about, ALU or teraflops, and it's...
Oh, God. I wasn't going to even bring that up with you, man.
It's frustrating because, that's ALU, right? That is just the computational calculation of what the chip can actually do theoretically if all the planets align, right?
Under all the best conditions,
I can't even... I'm trying to think. I've never come across a system or a GPU which has been ALU bound. You don't use all ALU. I mean, if over a series of frames you're using between 60 to 70% of ALU, you're probably doing pretty well. Your system's you're probably using as much of the system as you can. I mean, you've got to have headroom in whatever you're doing to go somewhere when something more complex is on screen. So the idea that a game would automatically always be using all of its resources,
let's move on.
bad coding. If your game is running at 100% ALU, one, congratulations on coding an engine which is getting absolutely everything out of the ALU while also getting everything out of rasterization and whatever else is going on. Congratulations, you're a wizard. I applaud you. You're far more intelligent than I have ever been. Good luck to you. I look forward to seeing your developed presentation and wondering how the f you did that. But, you know, fair play. But let's just say that does happen, right? What happens when all of a sudden an explosion goes on screen and you got 15 AI on screen? Your game's going to drop frames.
Sure.
So the idea that it's just the idea that it's a balancing act. Any kind of interactive software is a balancing act. You know, you have a frame budget. Yeah, you have a frame budget. You have a frame budget to get everything done within that frame budget. If it's 60 frames per second, you got to get it done in like 16.6 recurring milliseconds. If it's you know 30 frames per second, you've got a little bit more. It's 33 milliseconds recurring, 33.3 milliseconds recurring. And you also have to think about frame pacing as well. So you can't suddenly spend can't spend 50 milliseconds on one frame and then 3 on the, it doesn't quite work like that. But I mean, obviously that does happen as a natural part of the processing of the code. That can happen, that frame pacing can be off, but that's not what you want. So yeah, that's not NDAs. But yeah, when I hear all that stuff, people talking about absolutes, it's like, well, for starters, do you actually know what bounds games more than if it's data. It's actually getting data from various levels of system storage to your memory to your cache, L3, L2, L1, and into your processor, whatever that is, whether it's a compute unit, whether it's a special magical piece of source on your chip that no one else has, whether it's the CPU. It's data. Because if you can't get data to where it needs to be processed, that chip ain't doing shit.
Yeah, if you can't process the data, the whole thing falls apart. I keep telling people, Cardigan King, that you're only as strong as your weakest link in. They don't want to hear it. All right, well, let's move on from that. Let's get back to NDA.
Cache misses kill games. Cache misses kill games. That's all I'll say.
Oh, ooh. All right. So yes, we'll get to that later. Hey, audience, look, we're going to get to stuff like the stuff he mentioned: rasterization, frame buffer, frame pacing, cache hits, cache misses. We're going to get to all of that stuff eventually, but right now we're just going to discuss NDAs, and we'll finish this up here in a few more minutes. I just got a couple of more questions. And they're more anecdotal, Cardigan King. And so the one is like, basically, so I'm assuming if you don't sign the NDA, if you're not willing to sign the NDA, you don't get the interview, or you don't get to be a contractor on the project. Or
pretty much.
If you're an employee, if you don't sign the working agreement that has the same stipulations as an NDA, then you just don't get the job.
Basically, yeah.
So what if you're a rock star? What if you're like just head and shoulders above everyone else, but you don't want to sign an NDA? Would they make an exception for that person? Have you ever heard of anything like that? Let me rephrase. Have you ever heard of any exceptions for really?
I've never heard of any exceptions. And honestly, if you're the rock star and if you're sort of like a development superstar, the likelihood is that the NDAs are there to protect you.
Oh, that's a good point, because you're going to be producing stuff so your work and stuff needs to be protected. Good point.
So let's create Bob Bobbinson, a super genius 3D engineer who's created this amazing engine for Bunny Hop 5. If I'm signing an NDA about how they're organizing the render pipeline and how they're recompiling the image at the end in the frame buffer from multiple rasterization points within the frame, and he's done some magical, done some magical coding that, I walk in there as a veteran and this guy's like a young 22-year-old, and I think, what a bastard, you're going to have a much better career than I've ever had. The NDA is there to protect him. If you're a superstar, the NDA is there to protect your work. It's not there to protect, So
at the end of the day, we're all human beings, right?
Yeah. I mean, you might have a very different contract, I suppose. Like, this technology that you are working on will be owned by the company, not by you. So you probably have a different problem. So when you move from the developers of Bunny Hop 5 to the next project, you might not be able to take some of your. Although again, how the hell you stop that? I mean, that's another problem. How do you stop intellectual property, or when it's code or techniques leaving a team? It's nigh on impossible. impossible to really do. But yeah,
but
I would argue
point
in that situation, I would say the NDA is there to protect the superstar.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we're human beings. We all work together, and then when you protect a company, you're really protecting the people, not the people.
Yeah.
All right, so let me move on to this last question. Again, this one I want you to be very vague here. I don't want you to give any specifics. But have you heard of any situations where people have violated NDA, or like what happens? Even if you haven't heard of it personally, can you just give us an idea of what happens when you do violate it?
I've been in a team where an NDA has been violated, actually, yeah. It was quite a few years ago. I was quite young. I say quite young, actually, wasn't that young. I was in my late 20s. And the NDA had been violated, and it wasn't a minor thing. It wasn't really just talking about, it wasn't just talking about what we were working on and how we were working on it. It was doing that, but it was talking about what we'd discovered from a new piece of hardware, a new piece of technology that hadn't even been released yet. People knew it was probably coming, but it hadn't been announced. And they're already talking about the cache setup, the memory setup, the GPU setup, and they were already talking about what was possible and what wasn't possible. And they did it on a tech site. They did it on a forum. And they were young. They were younger than me. They were just out of university, and they were probably a little bit excited. And we had an investigation team coming in. They took our mobile phones off us.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because they breached an NDA, which is actually an NDA for a hardware manufacturer, and not just one hardware manufacturer. With these NDAs, sometimes you can have like multiple corporations that want stuff protected. So you have the manufacturer of the GPU or the silicon itself. You have the person who's actually the company that's making the console, let's say, or the graphics card or whatever it is. They want stuff protecting. Maybe there's software that's sitting on top of that hardware.
Wow, yeah.
So quite often you find that when you're given early access to software development kits and the materials and the paperwork to go along with that,
like manuals, documentation, all of that.
Yeah. And the library, the API libraries and all the compiler. Oh, but to get access to all of that, you're signing NDAs, okay? You are signing NDAs. But so this guy, I feel bad because I did feel bad for the guy. But he revealed stuff he shouldn't.
Sure. And as a result, an investigation team. They even took your phone.
Oh yeah, they took our phones off us. They just came in one day, asked for our phones, handed them over. We had to unlock them.
Wow.
He fessed up at that point.
Oh, because they wasn't sure who did it. Okay, they just knew it came from you guys. And they were going to get to the bottom. Okay.
It had to come from us. I had no idea this had been put on a forum, right? But when I looked at what had been put on the forum, I was like, are you serious? I mean, it's like, it could have only have come from maybe 5-10 people.
Okay.
Because it was very specific to our project, right? So it's not like if it's spoken in the general, oh, well, you can generally do this with this general box. And we are generally doing this with this general box, and didn't mention actual specific details. I think that a very bit.
Okay, look, I know it's good, but we got to cut it right here. We got a 15-minute time limit, and we have to leave time for the quiz. I know y'all want to finish the whole thing right now, but we got to respect people's time. So 15 minutes is the limit, and let's knock out this quiz. Okay, so that's it. Time's up. Pencils down. How did y'all do? Now, in my mind, this quiz wasn't that hard. You're learning stuff as you go. It's interesting. Good inside stories from the industry. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, please leave us a like. If you think this kind of material is interesting to you and you want more of it, and go ahead and subscribe. We would appreciate it. Tell all your friends, all your neighbors, whoever it is you think that would also enjoy this type of content. Please let them know about the channel. Tell them to come give us a look, and they can decide for themselves if it's something that they want to like or subscribe to or not. So hey, we appreciate the support thus far, and we will be back to finish this series on NDAs. Peace.